20,000 people, 8 narrow streets, 150 tons of tomatoes. From high above, it looked like a massacre already in progress. So the Kithran ascendancy attacked the town of Bunyal at the exact moment it believed humanity was busy dying. It was not a massacre. It was a festival, and it had not even started yet. If you enjoy stories where aliens pick the single worst spot on Earth to land, take 1 second and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And share this one with a friend who loves a good invasion going wrong. And tell me in the comments which moment made you laugh out loud. Now, let us move forward down into the narrow streets of Bunyal, where the storm is about to begin. Bunyal is a small town in eastern Spain, tucked into a dry valley about 40 minutes inland from the coast. 9,000 people live there. It has a castle on the hill, a river at the bottom, a bakery that opens before the birds do, and a set of streets that were laid out long before anyone imagined a delivery van. Those streets matter. They are stone, they are steep, and the widest one is barely wide enough for 2 people to pass without one of them apologizing. Everything in this story happens because of those streets. Once a year, the town fills up. 20,000 visitors arrive with tickets, wearing old clothes and swim goggles, and the shopkeepers cover every window on the main square with heavy plastic sheeting, taped down at the corners. Bar owners wrap their awnings. Somebody always tapes over the church notice board, then everyone waits. The rules are short. Squash the tomato before you throw it. Throw nothing else. Stop when the second signal sounds. That is the whole rulebook, and for 1 hour the whole town lives by it. But the fight does not start until somebody climbs the greased pole. That is the tradition. A tall wooden pole is set up in the middle of the square, coated in soap and grease, with a cured ham tied to the top. Nobody gets to throw a single tomato until some brave, slippery idiot reaches that ham. Some years it takes 10 minutes. Some years it takes an hour. Ray Kessler had watched 20 of those climbs, and he had bet on the wrong man every single time. Ray was 63, built like a mailbox, and had spent 31 years as a fire captain in Toledo, Ohio, before deciding he wanted to live somewhere the plumbing had opinions. He ran the volunteer hose crew, which meant that when the hour ended, Ray and 6 other men opened the lines and washed the whole square clean. He owned a pickup, a bad knee, and a pump manifold he loved more than most of his relatives. His neighbor was Dolores Whitaker, and nobody had called her Dolores in a decade. She was Dot. 58 years old, silver streak in her hair, and she ran the bar on the corner of the square with a set of rules she had never written down and never once bent. She could end an argument with a look and start one with a dish towel. Under her bar stool sat a small brown terrier named Rooster, who had decided years ago that the entire festival was beneath him and had never revised that opinion. Dot's nephew Tyler was 25 and did the sound. He hung the speakers, ran the cables, and spent the rest of the year doing live audio for bands in Valencia. He had one talent that would matter very soon. He could listen to a noise and tell you exactly what frequency it was sitting on. Marty Coyle drove one of the trucks. 34, permanent sunburn, hauled produce up and down the coast 11 months a year, and hauled tomatoes into Bunyal for the 12th. 6 trucks came in that morning, loaded to the rails with soft red tomatoes grown cheap and grown ugly, a variety nobody eats and everybody throws. And on the high road above the town, Wade Brandt was checking his drums. Wade was 71, a retired crop scientist, and he handled the cleanup chemistry. 12 sealed drums of food-grade citric acid concentrate, used every year to help the water cut through the pulp and the sugar. Everybody in town called it Wade's vinegar. Wade had corrected them for 19 years and had given up sometime around the 10th. None of them knew that far above the valley, a survey report was being read out loud. The bridge of the Kithran flagship was quiet and cold. Commander Sorrel Vask stood at the front with his hands behind his back, listening while his fleet adjutant read the numbers. Population density in the target valley increases by 200% for 1 day of the local year, the adjutant said. Then the recorded event begins. Observation shows a large volume of red fluid released into the streets. Native subjects are covered in it. They are packed into narrow passages. They are screaming. They are striking each other by hand. Duration, Vask said. 1 hour, Commander, then it stops. The streets are washed. The bodies are not recovered. Vask turned that over. 17 worlds had fallen to the ascendancy, and every one of them had been taken at its weakest hour. This was a weak hour. This was a species that thinned its own numbers once a year in a stone valley with no defenses. At the back of the room, a junior officer raised one hand. "Speak, Pell," Vask said. Sub-analyst Pell cleared his throat. "Commander, I have run the fluid analysis 3 times. The composition is mostly water. There is sugar in it. There are seeds in it. And your conclusion? I believe it is produce, sir." The room went silent in the way rooms do when someone has said something the commander does not want to hear. "You believe the natives are murdering each other with fruit," Vask said. "I believe they are not murdering each other at all, sir." Vask did not raise his voice. He never did. Log the objection. "Ignore it. We land at the start of the hour while they are occupied. We take the valley, we take the survivors, and we hold this world's attention with a single afternoon of work." He looked out over the blue curve of the planet below. "Nothing on that surface is going to surprise us." Down in the square, a young man in swim goggles finally got a hand around the ham. 20,000 people roared. The first truck rolled into the street with its engine grinding low, red rails packed high, and the crowd surged toward it with their arms already up. And then every one of those 20,000 people saw the shadow slide across the plastic sheeting above their heads. The first tomato left somebody's hand about 2 seconds later, because in Bunyal, once the ham comes down, nothing stops the hour. Not weather, not sirens, certainly not a shadow. Within a minute, the air over the square was solid red. Tomatoes came off the truck by the armful, went up in a great arc, and came down on everybody equally. The stone turned slick. The gutters ran. Somebody at the far end started a chant, and 400 people joined it without knowing the words. This is what 150 tons of soft fruit looks like when it is set loose in a space the size of a parking lot. Into the middle of that, the Kethran landing craft came down. It was a flat black wedge the size of a house, and it settled right where the fountain used to be visible, hovering a body length above the pulp with its landing struts out. The downwash flattened the crowd nearest to it. Plastic sheeting snapped. Dot's awning tore off its frame with a sound like a gunshot and folded itself into the alley. And 20,000 soaked, goggled, sugar-covered human beings looked up at an alien assault craft and decided it was part of the show. The cheer that went up could be heard on the highway. "They got a float this year," somebody yelled. "That is a heck of a float," yelled somebody else and threw a tomato at it. Then everybody threw a tomato at it. Captain Drennick's assault ramp came down into a wall of incoming fruit. He had led boarding actions on 4 worlds. He had never once had to lower his head. 12 troopers walked out into the square in sealed bronze armor, weapons up, boots hitting a surface with the exact friction of a wet bathroom floor, and the crowd greeted them like a marching band. The first trooper made it 4 steps before his legs went out from under him. The second one lasted 6, mostly because he grabbed the first one on the way down. Drennick activated the translator and let the broadcast roll across the square at full volume. "People of this valley, your world is now the property of the Kethran ascendancy. All resistance is meaningless." 20,000 people heard a very loud voice say something they could not make out over the chanting, assumed it was the sound crew, and threw harder. Up on the flagship, the adjutant reported carefully. "Commander, Captain Drennick reports contact with the entire population at once. Casualties? Ours or theirs, sir?" Vask turned around slowly. "Explain that question." Back in the square, Ray Kessler was watching from the bar doorway with a wrench in his hand and pulp up to his ankles. And Ray was the first person in Bunyal to understand that this was not a float. He had seen enough emergencies to know the difference between a machine that is performing and a machine that is working. Those weapons were tracking. Those helmets were scanning. And that landing craft had just crushed his pump manifold flat under its rear strut. Ray looked at the ruined manifold. He had rebuilt it 3 times. He had machined the coupling himself. "Well," he said, "now I am involved." Dot came out beside him holding what was left of her awning frame. Rooster came out behind her, took one look at the alien assault craft, and sat down in the pulp with his back to it. "They tore my awning," Dot said. "They flattened my manifold. That awning was fitted in March." That manifold was fitted in my heart, Ray said. Tyler slid in behind them, soaked to the collar, holding a cable in his teeth. He spat it out. Aunt Dot, the mains are dead. Whole grid. Phones too, I have got no bars anywhere. Dot did not even look up. Half this valley has no bars in August anyway. And the power goes out here every time a bird sits on something. That was the second thing the Kithrin got wrong. They had cut the electricity and jammed the towers, which on 17 worlds had caused panic. In Bunyal it caused nothing, because the festival ran on air horns, whistles, truck engines, and a church bell that had never needed a plug in its life. Out in the square, things were going badly for Drennick. 6 of his 12 troopers were down and could not get up, not because they were hurt, because they could not get purchase. Their boots were designed for grit and dust, and the pulp underneath them was 8 inches deep and had the grip of buttered glass. Every time one of them pushed off, he simply moved sideways. Worse, their armor was sealed against water, not against this. Tomato pulp is water and sugar and fiber and seed, and it went into the intake vents in soft handfuls and stayed there. Helmet lenses fogged, then filmed, then streaked. One trooper wiped his visor and made it worse. "Command, this substance is degrading my optics," a trooper reported. "Then stop wiping it," Drennick snapped. "Command, it is inside my breathing filter." Drennick checked his own threat readout. The translator had classified the incoming objects and was displaying its best guess in calm bronze letters. Soft red ordnance, unlimited supply, launch rate uncountable. Drennick looked up at a sky that was, in a very literal way, full of tomatoes. He was a professional. He had been a professional for 206 years. He gave the order that any professional gives when his unit is being buried alive by a civilian population that has not even noticed it is fighting. All units. Live fire. The first bolt went into the wall above the bakery. It took out a window frame, a hanging basket, and about 4 feet of stone, and the sound it made was nothing like a firework. And for the first time in 147 years of that festival, in the middle of the hour, everything stopped. Every arm came down. 20,000 people went silent at once. Somewhere behind the truck, a single tomato hit the ground and rolled. And the water cannon that ends the fight, the one that has sounded every single year without fail, did not sound at all. What happened next was not brave and it was not funny, and everyone who lived through it said the same thing afterward. It was fast. 20,000 people in 8 narrow streets cannot run. There is nowhere to go. What they can do is move all at once like water in a pipe, and that is what they did. The square drained into the side alleys in about 90 seconds. People went through doorways. People went over the low wall by the church. People went into the bar and kept going into the cellar. Nobody died. That is worth saying plainly, because the Kithrin had not come to kill. Vask needed the population. 17 worlds had taught him that a frightened crowd is worth more than a dead one, and his troopers were firing high and firing at stone. There were cuts and there were falls, and there was a man from Michigan with a broken wrist who told that story for the rest of his life. But nobody died in the square. The reason nobody died is that the fight ended before it could get worse, and the reason it ended is that Ray Kessler grabbed the church bell rope. He rang it 11 times. Slow, even. It is the signal the town uses for a fire in the old quarter, and every local hears it in their spine. It told 9,000 residents to open their doors and pull people inside, and it told 20,000 visitors that somebody, somewhere, was still in charge. By the time Drennick reached the bell tower, the square was empty, and Ray was gone through the sacristy door. Then the Ascendancy did what it always did, and did it well. 3 more craft came down on the ridges above the valley and dropped containment posts, and a low gray wall of energy closed the valley mouth from the highway to the river. Nothing on wheels was leaving. 2 walkers came down after them. 4 legs each, high-armored bodies, a weapon pod on either side, and they took the high road and the bridge in under 10 minutes. The walkers were the problem. Ray understood that the second he saw one step over a parked car. 4 legs, wide stance, a low center of gravity, they would not slip. And then, because Vask was thorough, a walker put 2 rounds into the pump house on the river road. The pump house is not a landmark. It is a concrete box with a green door. It is also the only thing standing between Bunyal and no water pressure at all, and when it came apart, Every hose in the town went soft in somebody's hands. Ray was one of those hands. He was on the river road with two of his crew, dragging a charged line toward the bridge, when the pressure died and the flat hose came out of his grip like a snake going home. The walker's spotlight found him standing in the open, holding nothing. They took him. Two troopers, no ceremony, straight up the road toward the plaza. By late afternoon, the Kithrin held the square, the bridge, the high road, and the valley mouth. They had herded roughly 4,000 people into the plaza and the church, and the rest were in cellars, garages, and back rooms all over town. Wade Brandt's greenhouse on the hill was burning in a slow, ugly way, because a walker had put a foot through the corner of it. Marty Coyle's truck was on its side at the top of Cal Sid, with 16 tons of tomatoes spilled across the road, and Marty was underneath the cab, alive, furious, and stuck. Down in Dot's cellar in the dark, about 40 people were trying to think. "There are 5 loaded trucks left," Marty said, once they had cut him out. He had a cut over one eyebrow and a look on his face that suggested he was going to bill somebody for it. 5, parked up top, past the containment line on the shoulder. Nobody touched them because there is nothing up there but trucks. 5 trucks of what? Somebody said. Tomatoes. "They have got armor. They have got armor," Tyler said, "and I want to show you all something." He had been out for 2 hours, going roof to roof. And what he had gone to look at was the 6 troopers who had gone down in the first minute of the fight. They were still in the square. They had not moved, not one of them. "They are not hurt," Tyler said. "They are stuck. The stuff dried on them. It has been in the sun for 4 hours, and it has gone hard, like glaze on a ham. Their joints are locked. 2 of them have got their helmets sealed shut." Wade Brandt looked up for the first time since his greenhouse. "Say that again?" "Their armor is sealed against water." "It is not sealed against this." "Of course it is not," Wade said quietly. "Water evaporates and leaves nothing. Pulp evaporates and leaves sugar and pectin and fiber. Put that on a hot machine and you are not washing it off. You are baking it on." Dot folded her arms. "And the acid is the other half," Wade said. "That is why we clean this square with it every year. It eats coatings. It will take the film right off a lens." There was a long pause in the cellar. "So we have got no water," Marty said. "No power, no phones, and a wall across the valley. And the plan is tomatoes. The plan is 100 tons of tomatoes," Tyler said, "at the top of the steepest street in Spain, up in the plaza." Commander Sorrel Vask stepped down from his shuttle onto the dried red crust of the square, looked at his 6 sealed troopers, and then at the ham still hanging from the top of the greased pole. He had Ray Kessler brought to him. "You will tell your people to come out of their holes," Vask said. "At first light we begin collection. Every person in this valley walks to the bridge in order and boards." Ray stood there, soaked, bleeding a little from one ear, 63 years old. "Sir," he said, "I have got to tell you something, and I want you to hear it right because you are not going to get another warning." Vask waited. "You landed on the 1 hour of the year when this town already had everything it owns in the air." They worked all night in the dark, which was the only thing the Kithrin had accidentally given them. The containment wall closed the valley mouth at the highway. It did not close the old irrigation channel, because the old irrigation channel does not look like a road, a bridge, or a door. It looks like a stone ditch full of weeds. It runs from the reservoir gate above the town, down along the hillside, past the top of Cal Sid, and it has been feeding the orchards on that slope since before anyone kept records. Wade Brandt had been arguing with the water board about that channel for 11 years. He knew every gate on it by hand. Tyler took 9 people up the goat path in the dark and reached the trucks a little after midnight. Marty went with them with his arms strapped, because nobody else in Bunyal could back a loaded truck down a 1-lane road in the dark without lights. And here is what they built, because this is the part that matters. Cal Sid is the top of the town. It runs downhill for about 400 meters, straight into the plaza between stone walls with no gaps. It has a slope you can feel in your knees. Every year the trucks come down it slowly, in low gear, dropping their loads as they go. Marty backed all 5 trucks up onto that road nose to tail, tailgates down, beds tilted to the top of their rams and chocked them there. Then Wade's people ran a hose from the irrigation channel gate down to the first truck bed, and another to the second, and so on down the line, so that when the gate opened, 40,000 liters of reservoir water would come down that hill and go straight through 5 loaded truck beds on its way to the square. And at the top, above all of it, they emptied the grease buckets from the greased pole across the first 30 meters of stone. "How much are we sending?" Dot asked. Marty did the math on his fingers. About 100 tons of tomato and 40,000 liters of water down a 400-meter chute all at once. Into a square with 2 alien walkers in it. Into a square, Wade said. With 2 alien walkers, 400 alien soldiers, 1 landing craft, and about 900 of our neighbors, which is why we are doing this at 4 in the morning. And why every one of those 900 is going to be behind the church wall when it comes. That was Ray's part, and Ray was in a holding pen behind the fountain. He got out because of Rooster. The dog had spent 2 days sitting in the pulp with his back to the invasion. And at 3:30 in the morning, he walked across the plaza and started barking at a walker's front left leg with the total commitment of an animal who has never once been wrong. 2 troopers went to deal with the dog. The pen was watched by 1 guard instead of 3 for about 40 seconds, and 40 seconds was enough for Ray Kessler and 4 men to go over the back wall into the alley by the bakery. By 4, the church wall was packed with people lying flat. By 10 past, the last of them had been pulled out of the plaza in 1s and 2s through the sacristy door, which the Keithran had never found because it is behind a curtain and looks like a cupboard. At 16 minutes past 4, Tyler put the church bell on the rope and rang it once. Wade opened the reservoir gate. The water came down the channel with a sound like a train arriving. It hit the first truck bed and lifted 16 tons of soft fruit off the steel like it weighed nothing, and then it hit the second and the third. And by the time it came off the tailgate of the 5th truck at the top of Cal Sid, it was no longer water, and it was no longer tomatoes. It was a wall. It came down that street 400 meters wide of nothing and 8 feet high at the front, red and dark in the moonlight, moving faster than anything that heavy has any business moving. And it took the grease with it. It took 2 parked scooters, a bench, and a section of scaffolding with it. Every window on Cal Sid held, because every window on Cal Sid had been taped with heavy plastic sheeting the previous morning by shopkeepers who do this every year. The Keithran sensors registered it 4 seconds out and classified it correctly. Soft red ordnance. Volume EXCEDS scale. The first walker turned to face it, which was the wrong decision. 4 legs are stable against a push from the side. They are not stable against a river. The wall hit it at the knee joints, went up the body, went into the shoulder vents, and put 12 tons of alien engineering flat on its back in the fountain. The second walker tried to step up onto the bakery terrace and got 1 leg planted before the grease reached it. It came down across the terrace and slid, still upright, all the way across the plaza on its side and into the wall of the town hall, where it stopped with a sound that woke up the next valley. 400 troopers went off their feet at once. The landing craft, which had been sitting on its struts, was shoved 11 meters and came to rest at an angle nobody could dignify. And then the whole thing kept going, out of the low end of the square, down the last street, and into the river, which turned red from the bridge to the bend, and stayed that way until noon. Behind the church wall, 900 people looked at each other in the dark. Then, from the flagship above, Commander Sorrel Vask gave an order he had never given on any of his 17 worlds. He brought his own ship down. It came down out of the dark over the castle hill, and it was not a landing craft. It was 200 meters of black hull, with 4 thrust housings on its underside. And when it dropped to 100 meters above the plaza, the downwash took the roof tiles off half the old quarter and pushed the red slurry into standing waves. Vask's voice came out of the hull loud enough to shake windows. "You have destroyed equipment. You have not changed the outcome. Bring your people to the bridge, or I will remove this valley from your world." In the alley behind the bakery, Ray Kessler was on his knees at a hydrant with a wrench in his hand. The pump house was gone, but Ray had spent 31 years learning one thing above everything else. Water does not need a pump if it has a hill. The reservoir was above the town and still open, and the town main was still a pipe. He cracked the hydrant and got pressure, real pressure, gravity-fed and steady, and his crew charged 4 lines off it in under 2 minutes. Wade's people rolled up with the drums. They ran citric concentrate straight into the lines through a foundation nozzle, the same setup they used every year to clean the square, and when the first line opened, it did not put out a fire. It put out a fan of acid mist 40 feet across at the base of the descending ship, and it painted every trooper, every sensor housing, and the entire underside of the hull. On the flagship, the reports started coming in on top of each other. Optical arrays degrading, intake pressure dropping all 4 housings, commander external coating is being stripped. Vask did not move. Ascend to 200 meters and clear the intakes. That was the correct order. It was also the last order that would have saved him, and it came about 90 seconds too late. Because at that moment, Marty Coyle was doing 32 kilometers an hour up the ramp of a Kithrin landing craft in a truck with 16 tons in the back. The craft had been shoved onto its side by the flood, and its bay ramp had come down and stayed down, pointing up the slope like an invitation. Marty had noticed. Marty had been noticing loading ramps for 11 years. He came off Cal Cid with his one good arm on the wheel, hit the ramp square, put the truck halfway into the bay, and pulled the tipper lever. 16 tons of tomato went into the guts of a Kithrin assault craft, into its open bay, into its lift plating, and straight down the internal conduit that fed the docking clamp housing, which was, at that moment, still magnetically married to the underside of the flagship, 200 meters up. Marty jumped out of the cab, hit the pulp, slid about 9 meters on his back, and later described this as the best day of his professional life. The pulp went up the conduit. Warm metal took it, dried it, and turned it into exactly what Wade had promised. Not a liquid, a glaze. It sealed the clamp housing open. Then it went into the number 3 thrust housing on the flagship's underside, and it did not come back out. The ship's readouts told Vask that he had lost one of 4 housings, then 2 of 4. Then the acid mist reached what was left of the optical arrays, and Sorrel Vask, commander of 17 conquered worlds, lost the ability to see the town he was standing above. The flagship pitched. It fought it. It corrected, overcorrected, and slid sideways over the old quarter with 1 thrust housing screaming, and 3 of them full of baked fruit, and it went down the valley in a long, ugly, tilting arc that took the top off nothing but a stand of pines. It came to rest in the reservoir, upside down, with its bow buried in the mud, and about 60 meters of hull sticking out of the water at an angle that every person in that town would describe, for the rest of their lives, as embarrassing. The containment wall failed 8 seconds later. Commander Sorrel Vask made it out with 19 of his guard. Their armor was streaked and pitted, their optics were gone, and their commander had a plan that had narrowed all the way down to finding somewhere with a door. They found Dot Whitaker's bar at 5:15 in the morning. Vask forced the door. 20 aliens came into a room with a tiled floor, a long wooden counter, and one woman standing behind it with a pressure washer in her hands, the kind rated for stone. Running off a gravity line that Ray Kessler had charged for her personally 40 minutes earlier. "You are dripping reservoir water on my floor," Dot said. "Stand aside. You tore my awning." Vask raised his weapon. Dot squeezed the trigger on the pressure washer. It is very difficult to aim a plasma carbine when you have taken a jet of acidified water to the visor at 130 bar. It is very difficult to do anything at all. Vask went backward over a table. The 19 behind him went out the door faster than they came in, straight into the square, where roughly 4,000 residents and visitors of Bunyal were standing in ankle-deep pulp with their goggles back on, and their arms already full. Rooster walked out from under the bar stool, sat down in the doorway, and watched the last stand of the Kithrin ascendancy with the expression of a dog who had called this from the beginning. The United States Air Force arrived at 9:40 that morning, which everyone in Bunyal agreed was very good time considering, and absolutely typical considering. Colonel Dean Hollies came in from Moran Air Base with 2 aircraft, 40 personnel, and a mission brief that had been written by somebody guessing. He sat down on the highway, walked into a town that was ankle-deep in red pulp, and found 19 alien prisoners zip-tied inside a municipal sports hall. 6 more sealed into their own armor in the square, 2 crashed walkers, 1 landing craft on its side, and 200 meters of interstellar flagship sticking out of the local reservoir at an angle. He stood there for a while, "Who is in charge here?" Colonel Hollis said. Every single person pointed in a different direction. He tried again. "Who organized the defense?" "Depends," Dot said. "Is there compensation?" "Ma'am, compensation for my awning." "And the pump house," Ray said. "And my greenhouse," Wade said. "And my truck," Marty said. "Which is currently inside their spaceship." "That was your idea," Tyler said. "It was a great idea," Marty said. "It was still my truck." Colonel Hollis took his cap off, held it in both hands, and looked at the reservoir for a moment. "Let us start with the alien commander," he said. They had put Sorrel Vask on an upturned crate in the shade with a bottle of water and a very small child from the bakery family staring at him from 4 feet away. His helmet was gone. His armor had the dull white streaks of citric acid across it. He had already worked out that his career was over and that the report would be read aloud. "What are your terms?" he asked. Ray Kessler thought about it, then he pointed at the square. "Put it back the way you found it." Vask looked at the pulp, the torn sheeting, the crashed walkers, the burned greenhouse, the broken pump house, and the town he had entered less than a full day earlier. "That is not possible. Now you are starting to understand the problem," Ray said. "Here is what happened afterward because this town is not sentimental and it does not stand still." Marty got his truck back 4 months later. It smelled like a farm stand and never stopped, and he refused every offer to have it cleaned. Wade rebuilt his greenhouse using panels salvaged off a walker, and reported the whole thing to the water board as an unauthorized modification, on principle. Ray rebuilt the pump house himself, and the manifold was better. Tyler wound up explaining to 3 separate governments how a sound engineer had worked out that a species which sealed its armor against water had never once thought about sugar. Dot mounted a cracked Kithrin helmet above her bar. Underneath it she taped a card, handwritten, that read, "First customer ever to leave without paying." The government offered Bunyal a monument. The town asked for the road up Cal Cid to be resurfaced instead. The request entered the appropriate department and is expected to receive a decision within 8 to 12 years. And a very long way from Earth, the Kithrin Ascendancy quietly rewrote the first page of its survey manual. One line was added above everything else, and every officer of every fleet has to read it before a landing is approved. Red is not always blood. Underneath it, in smaller letters, is a second line, added by an officer who had spent his entire career being told he was wrong. Verify that the natives are not enjoying themselves. Sub-Analyst Pell was promoted twice. He kept the original fluid analysis. He had it framed. If you made it this far, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me your favorite moment, whether it was the greased pole, the pressure washer, or Marty putting a truck inside a spaceship. And share this one with somebody who needs it today. It genuinely helps the channel more than you know. The following year, the town held the festival again, because of course it did. 20,000 people came. The shopkeepers taped the windows. The trucks came down Cal Cid in low gear. And a young man in swim goggles went up the greased pole with the whole square shouting at him. Ray Kessler stood in the doorway of Dot's bar with a wrench in his hand out of pure habit and watched him climb. Because there was one thing nobody in Bunyal ever talked about, and it was this. On the morning of the invasion, the ham had come down off that pole about 6 seconds before the shadow crossed the square. If that climb had gone the way most climbs go, if it had taken the usual 40 minutes, the Kithrin would have landed in an empty street, in a quiet town, with nothing in the air at all. Ray watched the young man's hand close on the ham. 20,000 people roared. The first tomato went up. "Some years," Ray said, "you get lucky." Dot handed him a towel. "Some years," she said, "you get the hour."